want to know whether his friends start robbing people while they're there to do contract work.
Go ahead and get your boy.
And you taking your daddy with you?
No, his daddy taking him.
Last night, the dad was granted bond for his role in the whole kidnapping and armed robbery plot on Gucci. The feds would see this and instantly file a motion to revoke his bond and keep his ass in there. He's currently still being held until the judge sees this motion, and by the looks of it, he's most likely staying.
Welcome back to BuzzBuster. I'm glad you're here. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss daily videos. For years, people have claimed Pooh Shiesty's father had been cooperating since 2009, and now critics are saying his son has carried that same label since 2022. When Pooh Shiesty walked out of federal prison in October 2025, it seemed like the beginning of a major turnaround. A clean slate appeared to be in front of him. Fresh music was ready, money was coming in, and a completely new chapter looked like it was finally taking shape. From the outside, it felt like the kind of comeback fans love to see. That momentum didn't last long.
Memphis rapper Pooh Shiesty was released from federal prison. I'm Leah Williams, and he was actually released months early.
Only a few months later, the entire situation took a sharp turn. Federal agents moved in, took both Pooh and his father into custody, and suddenly the story became far bigger than anyone expected. Once the court documents started circulating, people zeroed in on one detail in particular: what his father allegedly told investigators. That revelation has fueled intense reactions and raised serious questions about everything the public thought it understood. This case isn't being viewed as a simple legal problem. To many, watching it unfold, it feels like a full-blown shockwave. Even the so-called meeting at the center of the conversation reportedly wasn't a normal meeting at all. According to what's being discussed, it was something else entirely. By the time people started trying to piece it together, social media was already in chaos. Viewers were confused, stunned, and trying to understand how someone who seemed to be rebuilding his life could end up back in federal custody so quickly, with his own father facing the same fate beside him.
Pooh Shiesty is cooked. This is all the evidence that they have on him and who is cooperating in Gucci Mane robbery situation.
Clearly, this wasn't some random misunderstanding or a brief moment that spiraled unexpectedly. There's a deeper story here, and to understand why everyone is talking, you have to look at the full chain of events. This was not a heated dispute that suddenly spiraled out of control. Based on the claims circulating, it was something far more deliberate. The entire situation appears to have been planned in advance, laid out carefully, and carried through one step at a time, with pressure placed on a single person at the center of it all. Reports describe 9 people involved, movements stretching across several cities, one intended target, and a meeting that may never have been genuine to begin with. That so-called sit-down everyone keeps mentioning is being portrayed as a front, just one piece of a much larger scheme.
They have ankle monitor data placing Pooh Shiesty at the studio location, despite his home detention restrictions, which is dumb as hell. Pooh should have knew better. They also have cell phone records and license plate reader data showing multiple suspects traveling together from Memphis to Dallas before the incident.
Its purpose, allegedly, was to bring every element into position at exactly the right time. Viewed from that angle, nothing about this feels random. The details make it look methodical, precise, and intentional. That is exactly why this case is landing with so much force right now, and why so many people are paying close attention. To understand how it all started, go back to January 10th, 2026, the day the situation truly began to take shape. On that afternoon, 3 music industry professionals got on a flight headed to Dallas. Their movements looked ordinary, almost boring, like another routine work trip already locked into the schedule. Plane tickets were booked, luggage was ready. Everything appeared polished, normal, and businesslike, the kind of travel that happens all the time when major deals are on the table.
This week, 9 individuals, including well-known musical artists, kidnapped and robbed at gunpoint numerous victims at a music studio in Dallas, Texas.
From their perspective, the plan seemed straightforward. They expected to talk business, go over the numbers, and return home without any surprises. As far as they knew, this was a standard meeting with a rapper interested in discussing contract terms. On the surface, nothing seemed unusual. that was the illusion. At first glance, there was nothing unusual about it. In the music business, meetings like this happen constantly. Contracts are discussed, partnerships are explored, and money moves hands every day. On the surface, it looked like another routine industry sit-down with no obvious warning signs and no reason to think twice. Everything changes when you look a little closer. Federal paperwork identified one of the three men involved using only two initials, R.D. Simple, understated, and easy to overlook. Still, it did not take long for those initials to be linked in reports to Roderick Dylan Davis, the artist the world knows as Gucci Mane. That detail immediately raised the stakes.
We also have surveillance footage of the whole thing that went down in the studio. And not to mention Pooh's pops visited a Staples store hours before the robbery, where they believe the contract release paperwork was printed. And to top things off, Gucci Mane also identified Pooh and told the feds everything.
Gucci Mane is not just another recognizable name in rap. He is the force behind 1017 Records, a label he helped build into a major presence in Southern hip-hop. Over the years, he became known for recognizing talent before the rest of the industry caught on, making bold moves and helping launch artists who later became major names. More than that, he played a key role in the rise of one young rapper from Memphis. When that artist was still barely 20, Gucci Mane saw potential and gave him a chance that others may have ignored. With that support, the rapper's career began to climb fast, turning early belief into real momentum. That artist was Pooh Shiesty. Here is where the story becomes even striking.
According to the account, Pooh Shiesty was the person who set this entire meeting in motion, connecting the pieces and bringing everyone together. What first appeared to be an ordinary business conversation suddenly carried a very different weight once those names and relationships entered the picture.
Pooh Shiesty, Shiesty's father, fellow rapper Big 30, and 6 others have been accused of robbing and kidnapping Gucci Mane at gunpoint and forcing him to release Shiesty from his record deal.
What seemed minor at first suddenly looks a lot heavier. Since about 2021, Pooh Shiesty had been part of 1017 Records, gaining serious traction through successful songs and a fan base that stayed firmly in his corner. His reputation meant something. By the time he was released from prison in October 2025, attention had not faded at all. If anything, the interest had only grown stronger. A lot of people were locked in, waiting to see how he would handle that fresh start and whether he could push his career to an even higher level. Away from the public, though, the picture reportedly looked very different. Problems had allegedly been growing behind closed doors. Reports say he was unhappy with the terms of his deal and wanted to separate from the label. Whatever friction had been building apparently did not go away with time. Federal prosecutors now claim that dispute turned into something much bigger. In their description, the case became one of the most daring and carefully coordinated armed robbery investigations connected to hip-hop in recent memory. That allegation alone changes the entire tone of the story. Now fast forward to that afternoon in Dallas. 3 men pulled up to a studio located off Dallas Parkway, expecting a routine meeting and nothing that seemed unusual. From their point of view, it was just another stop, just another business moment. Instead, they found the building still closed when they arrived. With no one ready to let them in, they did what most people would do in that situation. They got out of the car and waited nearby, unaware that the day was about to take a dramatic turn. They grabbed some liquor, returned, and settled in to wait. The mood was calm. No tension, no alarm, just a group of businessmen expecting a routine sit-down at the studio.
As alleged, once these 3 men were inside the recording studio, Williams Jr. and 8 co-conspirators, several of whom traveled from Memphis, Tennessee, executed a coordinated armed takeover.
Nothing in that moment felt off. There were no clear red flags, no uneasy feeling in the air, and absolutely no sign of the sudden turn waiting just ahead. At 3:43 p.m. sharp, everything around them was about to change in a way no one inside could have predicted. The only way to describe it is simple: an ambush. Inside, Gucci Mane and the people with him believed they were walking into an ordinary business discussion. What they didn't know was that a completely separate operation had already been set in motion. Outside the building, 9 individuals were closing in,
all playing a role in something that appears to have been arranged long before that day. This wasn't just a local situation either. Reports say some of those involved came from Memphis, spending hours on the road just to arrive at that exact place and time. That detail says a lot. It suggests this was not spontaneous. It was not careless. Every indication points to a plan that had been organized in advance. Soon, all of those moving pieces were about to meet in one location. Nothing about their approach seemed improvised. They weren't reacting in the moment or figuring things out as they went. Each move appears to have been mapped out beforehand.
As alleged, Williams Jr. produced an AK-style pistol and forced one of the victims to sign a release from the recording contract at gunpoint. The remaining conspirators displayed firearms and robbed the other victims of Rolex watches, jewelry, cash, and other high-value items.
Travel, timing, and positioning all seem to have been carefully aligned. Coordination stretched across more than one city, and the schedule was precise. From the outside, it looked less like chance and more like a setup that had been building toward this exact moment. At first glance, it might have seemed like a mistake. Federal prosecutors say it was anything but random. In their view, this was carefully arranged from the very beginning, and they identify Pooh Shiesty, legally known as Lontrell Williams Jr., as the person at the center of it all. According to the complaint, prosecutors believe he was the driving force behind the operation. They say he was the one who arranged the meeting, shaped the setup, and allowed growing frustration over his contract situation to escalate into something far more serious. From their perspective, this was not simply an artist trying to get out of a business agreement. Instead, they allege he took a much more dangerous route, one that involved weapons and several armed people inside a Dallas recording studio.
One of the victims was actually choked by one of the defendants to the point of near unconsciousness. Defendant Wright barricaded the studio door with his body to prevent the victims from escaping.
What makes the allegations even more striking is that prosecutors say he was not acting alone. Authorities also point to his father, Lontrell Williams Sr., who is known in music circles as Mob Boss. Rather than being portrayed as someone trying to defuse the situation, he is described by investigators as someone who may have been involved from the earliest stages. Reports referenced by authorities say his father had multiple phone calls with the studio owner earlier that same day. Those conversations, according to investigators, were part of confirming and securing the session. Prosecutors do not frame those calls as an effort to prevent the meeting from happening. Instead, they allege the contact helped keep everything moving exactly as planned. Taken together, prosecutors paint a picture of a situation that was not spontaneous, but deliberate, an operation they say was carefully coordinated well before anyone ever stepped inside the studio. One detail completely changes the way this case looks. According to reports, surveillance video places him outside the building before showing him entering at exactly 3:28 p.m., just moments before everything began. A timestamp that exact is hard to dismiss. What makes it even more striking is the number of people involved. 9 individuals appearing together is not the kind of thing you casually write off as bad timing or a strange coincidence. It suggests coordination. It points to a group arriving with a shared objective, moving in sync, and showing up at the same place for the same purpose.
Shiesty was arrested by the FBI in Texas this afternoon, with the Department of Justice accusing the rapper and 8 other suspects of being involved in a robbery and kidnapping attempt against Gucci Mane in Dallas. The feds allege that Shiesty pointed an AK-style pistol at Gucci Mane and forced him to sign a contract release while Big 30 blocked the door, stopping anyone from leaving.
Seen that way, this no longer feels like confusion or a spontaneous situation. It starts to look like something organized in advance, requiring planning, timing, and deliberate movement. The complaint paints a picture of people making a serious choice inside a music studio during a contract dispute, and that choice appears to have shifted the course of everything that followed. After the group got inside, the situation reportedly changed almost immediately. The people involved were separated right away, with no visible delay and no sign of uncertainty. Gucci Mane was allegedly taken into the recording room.
Also in that room, according to the complaint, were Pooh Shiesty, his father, and Big 30, Rodney Wright Jr. At the same time, two other individuals named in the complaint, identified as MM and BP, were reportedly kept in the control room, while the rest of the group remained nearby watching them. From there, the situation reportedly intensified even further, raising more questions about how much preparation may have gone into what happened inside that studio. The story took an even darker turn. In a 32-page federal complaint, investigators say Pooh Shiesty reached into a bag, removed contract termination documents, and placed them in front of Gucci Mane, demanding that he sign immediately. Gucci Mane, however, reportedly refused to cooperate. Instead of agreeing on the spot, he examined the paperwork, challenged what he was seeing, and resisted. That decision appears to have changed the entire atmosphere in an instant, turning a tense exchange into something far more alarming.
Two musicians agreed to meet, Radrick Davis, otherwise known as Gucci Mane, and an artist on his 1017 Records label, Lontrell Williams Jr., otherwise known as Pooh Shiesty. Prosecutors say Williams wanted out of his recording contract, brought several associates with him to that meeting, and that at gunpoint forced Gucci Mane to release him from that contract.
According to authorities, a firearm was then introduced into the situation, identified in the complaint as an ATE-style pistol, and it was allegedly aimed directly at Gucci Mane. Investigators say the pressure to sign increased sharply at that point, pushing the encounter into a level of seriousness that left almost no room to maneuver. With that threat hanging over him, multiple armed people allegedly inside the building, and his own associates reportedly being kept in a separate room, Gucci Mane ultimately signed the papers. Based on the complaint, officials believe the signature was given under extreme pressure in a moment where there appeared to be no safe or realistic way to walk away. What happened next only added to the tension. After the documents were signed, Pooh Shiesty allegedly passed the contract to his father for review. His father reportedly went through the paperwork and noticed an issue, raising yet another question in a situation that was already spiraling fast. One crucial detail was still incomplete. The date had not been written. According to the report, Gucci Mane was instructed to add it, finishing the document on the spot. Once that happened, the situation reportedly escalated in a major way. The complaint claims Big 30 then took out his phone and began filming Gucci Mane, recording the moment on video as he said out loud that Pooh Shiesty was being released from the contract. This, investigators suggest, was not a spur-of-the-moment reaction. It was allegedly done deliberately, with each step captured to create a clear record of what was taking place. What makes the allegation even more striking is the level of coordination described in the filing. Rather than chaos, the complaint portrays a sequence that appeared organized. Every person allegedly had a specific task. One individual was said to be holding the weapon. Gucci Mane's father reportedly examined the paperwork. Big 30 allegedly documented the scene on his phone. At the same time, others in the group were said to be controlling activity in a separate room. Meanwhile, the report says numerous personal items were being taken throughout the incident. The list is extensive: Rolex watches, jewelry, cash, a 1017 chain, and earrings.
The remaining conspirators displayed firearms and robbed the other victims of Rolex watches, jewelry, cash, and other high-value items.
According to the complaint, nearly everything of value was gathered up. Taken together, these claims paint a picture of something far more methodical than emotional. The filing suggests this was carried out with intention, with documentation, paperwork, and property all becoming part of the same unfolding moment. There are also claims. A claim surfaced during a live stream from someone who said they had insider information, alleging that Gucci Mane's earrings were taken straight from his ears in the middle of the incident. If that account is accurate, it suggests the encounter became extremely personal and alarmingly close in a matter of seconds. Inside the control room, the situation was reportedly no less severe. According to the federal complaint, a person identified as MM was allegedly restrained around the neck so intensely that he nearly blacked out. Investigators also referenced photographs showing neck marks, scratches, and other visible injuries, all of which appeared to support claims that physical force was used inside the studio. Elsewhere, the atmosphere was said to be tightly controlled. Reports claim Big 30 stood at the studio entrance and physically blocked the doorway, making sure no one could move freely. Entry was cut off. Exit too. The allegation is that nobody was allowed to leave until the group had done what they came to do. Prosecutors describe it as a scene where every movement in that room was being dictated. The tension only escalated from there. At one stage, authorities say Pooh Shiesty pressed a firearm against another person's head while ordering them towards a particular exit. In that instant, the entire room shifted. Fear took over immediately. Later, those involved told investigators they believed they might not make it out of the studio alive. It wasn't simply a moment of intimidation in their eyes. According to their statements, it felt far more serious than a threat, like the outcome of the night was no longer in their control.
Gucci Man got robbed and didn't tell nobody but the law. I told y'all, man. People who are paying goddamn taxes and law-abiding citizens, man, ain't nobody trying to hear that shit. Pooh Shiesty, Big 30, come here.
The people inside weren't merely rattled. In that moment, they reportedly believed their lives were in immediate danger, as if they might not make it out of the studio at all. Fear at that level says everything about how intense the situation allegedly became. Reports say the takeover continued until roughly 4:50 p.m. when the group finally left. You might think that would be the end of it. Instead, the story only became more unbelievable. Later that very evening, several of the individuals allegedly involved were said to be posting on social media. What made those posts so shocking was what they appeared to show: jewelry and watches that seemed to match the items reportedly taken during the incident. Rather than staying out of sight, they were allegedly putting everything on display in public view, almost as if no fallout was coming, as if nobody was paying attention to what had just happened. That assumption, however, appears to have been a major mistake. An incident this serious was never going to slip under the radar, and authorities were not expected to simply let it pass. Once those images started circulating, the situation reportedly became even harder to explain away. Here's where the case takes an even sharper turn. In many investigations like this, there's usually some gray area. Facts get disputed. Timelines are questioned. Defense teams often look for gaps, contradictions, or uncertainty in the evidence. Based on what has been reported, though, this case may not have offered much room for that kind of argument. Why? Because on that same day, January 10th, 2026, the very afternoon this entire operation allegedly unfolded, Pooh, at the time, Shiesty had a Jeep's ankle monitor on him. This was not some basic tracking device. Federal authorities had required it as part of his supervised release from an earlier conviction. What made that detail so serious is how precise the system was. The monitor recorded movement, time, and location with remarkable accuracy. A condition meant to quietly oversee his routine suddenly became one of the most significant pieces of evidence connected to the case. Investigators had no reason to overlook it. The device documented where he went, when he moved, and how long he stayed in each place. Location data was being collected constantly and transmitted directly to federal authorities in real time. In other words, his steps were not private. Every stop, every route, every shift in position was logged without interruption. That is what makes this part stand out.
Pooh Shiesty alleged kidnapping incident with Gucci Mane was caught on surveillance.
According to the allegations, he entered this situation while still under active federal monitoring. The very system designed to watch his compliance may have also created a detailed timeline of his actions. After Pooh Shiesty left prison in October 2025, he was not returning to unrestricted freedom. He had served roughly 3 years of a 63-month sentence, but his release came with strict conditions. From there, he was placed on supervised release, and that supervision included home confinement in Dallas, Texas. None of those restrictions were vague. The expectations were clear, direct, and already in place. He was still operating under federal rules, and the ankle monitor was a constant reminder that authorities could follow his movements at any moment. In a case like this, that kind of digital record is impossible to dismiss. The terms were straightforward and impossible to misunderstand. Do not commit another federal crime and do not have a gun. Two basic conditions, nothing vague about them. Yet prosecutors say both were allegedly violated at once in the very same location while his ankle monitor remained attached and continuously tracking where he was. That single fact gives the case a completely different weight. At the moment this happened, officials said he was still on home confinement. That is not rumor or online speculation. Authorities stated it publicly. In fact, the United States Attorney for the Northern District of Texas addressed reporters and spelled it out during a press conference, making sure the public understood just how serious the allegations were. This also was not someone new to the federal system. He had already served time in federal prison before. He already knew what it meant to lose years of freedom. More importantly, he understood how federal cases come together piece by piece through careful documentation, surveillance, and evidence gathering. None of that was unfamiliar territory. By that point, his son had been in federal custody since 2022. Even with all of that history, all of that experience, and all of those warning signs, this situation still unfolded. Everything escalated when the Department of Justice unsealed the criminal complaint and presented the evidence publicly. Once that happened, the story shifted from rumor to an official federal case laid out in front of cameras. That moment was critical because it showed this was not being treated as a minor violation or a misunderstanding. According to the government, the allegations pointed to a serious breach of the court's trust while he was still under strict supervision.
Shiesty's Memphis home was raided early Wednesday morning. Shiesty joined Gucci's label in 2020. There were rumors floating around that Pooh Shiesty attempted to rob Gucci Mane of his wedding ring a few weeks ago, and these arrests now seem to give those rumors more credence.
The first revelation prosecutors pointed to was so shocking it stopped people in their tracks. It centered on one thing, his ankle monitor. In an instant, that detail changed the entire conversation. Reports say the same tracking device ordered by the federal government as part of Pooh Shiesty's release conditions placed him at the Dallas studio address at the very moment the armed incident was unfolding. Take a second to let that sink in. Nobody had to come forward. No witness statement was needed. There was no dramatic accusation required. Based on what's been presented, the monitor itself created the timeline.
Every movement was supposedly being recorded live, captured automatically, and transmitted directly to authorities the whole time. Once clips began circulating online of the U.S. attorney reading that evidence in court, the public reaction was immediate. People didn't need much context to understand why it mattered. Hearing that he was allegedly wearing the monitor during the robbery made the case feel far more serious. More than anything else, that was the detail people kept coming back to. It stood out because this wasn't someone unfamiliar with the justice system. Pooh Shiesty had already spent time in federal prison. He had already seen how investigators build cases piece by piece. That background made the allegations even more startling in the eyes of many watching. What made the moment so gripping was how simple the evidence sounded. Not a rumor, not speculation, just location data from a device designed to track him in the first place. For a lot of people following the case, that detail didn't just raise eyebrows, it completely reshaped how they saw everything that came after. He knew exactly how powerful a federal case can become once the evidence starts piling up. Even so, the allegations claim he stepped into this situation while wearing a live Jeeps monitor. That alone would raise eyebrows, yet it was only one part of a much bigger picture. Federal investigators say the trail went far beyond the ankle monitor. They also cited phone data and license plate reader records that allegedly followed several people traveling from Memphis to Dallas. Step by step, the route was reportedly reconstructed through phone locations, cell tower connections, plate reader hits, and precise time records. Piece after piece, authorities say the timeline began to match up. Another detail stands out and gives the allegations even more force. Lontrell Williams Sr., now charged as a co-conspirator, is accused of renting the vehicle tied to that trip. Documents reportedly show his name on a Hertz agreement for a white Buick Enclave. According to investigators, that is the same SUV used to transport the group from Memphis to Dallas. That point matters because it suggests far more than a chance appearance. Authorities are not describing someone who simply happened to be there at the wrong time. Their theory points to preparation in advance, with transportation arranged ahead of the trip.
Pooh Shiesty about to get life in federal prison because he robbed and kidnapped Gucci Mane, and Gucci said he did it. According to the paperwork, Shiesty, his dad, and Memphis rapper Big 30 had Gucci pinned in a corner inside of a recording booth. Shiesty upped Draco and they made him sign a release letting him go from the 1017 label before robbing Gucci of his earrings, jewelry, his wedding ring, and cash.
Taken together, the claims paint a picture of careful coordination. Investigators say the digital records, travel data, and rental paperwork all support the same basic story. On their side of the case, this was not treated as a loose collection of clues. It was presented as a connected chain, built record by record, designed to show that the trip was organized well before anyone arrived in Dallas. Long before anyone showed up, the groundwork had already been set. Prosecutors say 9 people traveled together in a single vehicle, moving across state lines with a clear objective in mind. Put that alongside the digital records, the sequence of events, and the timeline already presented, and the government argues it reveals a highly organized chain of actions that unfolded one step at a time. What makes the case even more striking is how much of it was reportedly caught on camera. Inside the studio, surveillance systems were active. Nearby, a Staples location also had cameras running. On top of that, the hotel where several of the people allegedly stayed afterward was also under video monitoring. Federal investigators are said to have gathered footage from all 3 places, giving them overlapping views, precise timing, and visual records of who went where and when. Taken together, those recordings reportedly create a detailed map of movement. Entries were captured, exits were documented. Timestamps helped lock the sequence into place. According to the case files, nearly every major step was preserved in some form, leaving investigators with a visual timeline they could follow from location to location. Next comes the forensic evidence, and this is where the allegations become even harder to ignore. Reports say latent fingerprints found inside the studio were matched to at least 2 of the defendants. That kind of physical evidence carries weight because it allegedly places specific individuals inside that exact location. Unlike speculation or secondhand claims, this points to something tangible investigators say they can directly connect to the scene. Just as that picture begins to sharpen, the case takes yet another turn. Not long after they left the studio, the situation took another turn. Investigators say several people involved uploaded photos to social media showing jewelry and other items believed to be connected to the incident. These weren't anonymous posts or accounts hiding behind fake names. The images appeared on verified profiles tied directly to the individuals themselves. What went online didn't simply fade away. According to the federal complaint, those posts were captured, preserved, and added to the case as evidence. Screenshots, timestamps, account details, all of it was reportedly documented and filed. In other words, the digital trail became part of the investigation. The timeline didn't stop there. Travel records allegedly placed some members of the group on a Greyhound bus leaving Dallas and heading back to Memphis the very next morning. Those tickets, investigators say, were not difficult to trace. They were logged, tracked, and eventually subpoenaed during the federal probe. Stack all of that together, and the picture starts to look much bigger. Surveillance video, fingerprint evidence, social media activity, bus records. Each piece appears to support the next, creating a case that investigators seem to have assembled one layer at a time from multiple directions. That's the point where public reaction began to change. Once these details surfaced, the conversation online shifted fast. People stopped focusing only on rumors and started asking a more pointed question. With this much documented evidence, what exactly happened behind the scenes, and who may have helped connect the dots?
Reports also indicate that one of the main victims became a central part of that growing discussion, adding even more attention to a case that was already gaining momentum. During the investigation,
Gucci Mane reportedly identified Pooh Shiesty, his father, and Big 30 in multiple ways, by name, by appearance, and even through their verified social media pages. There's no guesswork in that. That's what happens when someone reports an incident and gives investigators the details tied to what they say happened to them. Viewed through a legal lens, that kind of response is straightforward. If someone has a weapon aimed at them and their belongings are taken, most people are going to speak. They're going to describe who was involved. They're going to help authorities understand the situation as clearly as possible. In that setting, it's not unusual at all. Outside the courtroom, though, people don't always judge things by legal standards. Public opinion moves differently, and online conversations follow their own code. Once that gap opened up, the situation started getting messy. Reports say Gucci Mane addressed the accusations head-on, taking to social media to reject the idea that he had cooperated in the way people were claiming. At the same time, he made it clear he still had the same edge and presence people have long associated with him. Fans who know his background understand he rarely says anything casually. Every statement carries weight, and every response feels deliberate.
Helping that shit like I join side. Nigga, please, nigga. They got $1 million, nigga. Broke ass nigga. Shit make a nigga heart hurt, boy. Don't make these niggas happy. These niggas ain't happy on home. Step to me, fuck nigga.
That's when Lil Woody entered the conversation and gave the whole situation a breakdown that caught a lot of attention. His take hit people because it framed the timeline in a way that made the controversy feel even bigger. Suddenly, this wasn't just about what was said in an investigation. It became about how the streets, the internet, and the legal system can all interpret the very same moment in completely different ways. When Came Home released new music, the response was immediate. Attention snapped back fast. Streams showed up, people were talking, and the support behind the return felt real. Early on, some doubted whether a first day out release could truly connect. That skepticism didn't last long. The interest was strong, the buzz kept building, and the path ahead looked wide open. What makes this chapter hit harder is everything that came with it. The opportunity was there, the money was there, the audience was there too. On the surface, it looked like the perfect setup for a major next step. Still, success is never just about what lands in front of you. A moment can be full of promise, yet still slip away if the thinking behind the choices stays the same. That's the part people keep circling back to. Conversations around this situation aren't only about the support he had or the doors that opened. They focus on how those chances were handled. Because access alone doesn't protect anything. If the mindset fails to grow with the moment, even the strongest comeback can lose its footing. Soon, the story shifted again. The cars, the image, the lifestyle, everything he once wanted seemed to be within reach. From the outside, it looked like the dream had arrived. Yet the bigger issue, according to many watching closely, was that the mentality behind it all never fully changed. By the next morning, April 2, 2026, everything had taken another unexpected turn. News was still spreading, and people were still trying to piece together how Pooh Shiesty had ended up back in federal custody. The comeback that seemed to be gaining serious traction was suddenly overshadowed by a new wave of questions. While attention was already centered on Pooh Shiesty and his father, a new twist suddenly took over the entire conversation. Wack 100 stepped in at exactly the kind of moment that sends social media into overdrive, and the reaction online was immediate. He phoned in to DJ Academic's live stream while more than 15,000 viewers were already tuned in live, watching everything unfold in real time. From the start, Mac made one thing clear. He said he had been sitting on major information for roughly 18 months, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal it. In his view, that moment had finally come. By then, both Pooh Shiesty and his father were in federal custody, each facing serious charges connected to the same case. With that as the backdrop, Mac decided not to hold anything back. What happened next raised the stakes even higher. Right there during the live stream, with no pause and no private handoff behind the scenes, he sent documents directly onto the stream for the audience to see.
Thousands of people watched as it unfolded live, second by second, making the moment feel even bigger. According to Wack 100, the paperwork was a federal memorandum of plea agreement dated April 15, 2009. He claimed those documents involved Lontrell Williams Sr., better known as Mob Boss and recognized as Shiesty's father. Wack further alleged that the paperwork showed Williams had agreed to provide substantial assistance. That claim instantly changed the tone of the live stream. What had already been a high-interest broadcast suddenly became something far more explosive as viewers tried to process what they were seeing and what it could mean. In one move, Wack 100 shifted the spotlight and turned the stream into a major online flashpoint. Under U.S. sentencing rules, a person can receive a lighter punishment if they provide assistance to the federal government. One section in particular, known as 5K 1.1, carries a heavy reputation, especially in street culture, where people describe it in blunt, unforgiving terms.
Wack 100 addressed that point head-on. There was no soft language, no careful framing, and no attempt to ease into it. He made the allegation directly and treated it like a settled issue. According to what he said, that claimed cooperation goes back to 2009, a time when Pooh Shiesty would have only been around 8 or 9 years old. That part of the claim shifted the conversation in a bigger direction because it put focus on the kind of surroundings he may have come up in, at least if those accusations are true.
The rules of the streets is if you cooperate with law enforcement and give them any information on any name other than yours, then yes, you are a rat.
The discussion didn't end there. Wack 100 also pointed the claim straight at Pooh Shiesty, saying he had allegedly been cooperating since 2022 in connection with his federal firearms conspiracy case in the Southern District of Florida. That is the same case where Pooh Shiesty entered a guilty plea to 1 count, while several more serious charges were later dropped. In the end, he received a sentence that was lower than what prosecutors had originally sought. As the stream unfolded, DJ Academics reportedly brought up federal court records in real time and looked through them live on air. While reviewing those files, he said the documents appeared to be authentic. That moment added even more intensity to the conversation because it made the claims feel less like random talk and more like something viewers believed was being tied to official paperwork. What he thought he was seeing changed the tone instantly. In a split second, the discussion jumped from ordinary chatter to something much bigger. With thousands of people tuned in live, those 2 words seemed convincing enough to set everything off. From there, the footage exploded across the internet. Within just a few hours, it was circulating on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Every platform was flooded with reactions. Some viewers were arguing, others were choosing sides, and plenty were trying to piece together what was actually true. Still, this is the point where the noise needs to be turned down. Not every comment, post, or reaction deserves the same level of trust. When a story gets this massive, confirmed facts and unverified claims can blend together fast. Once that happens, it all starts sounding equally believable, even when it clearly isn't. Here's the key part many people are missing. Wack 100 has raised these accusations before. This situation did not suddenly appear out of nowhere. He has been making similar claims since at least February 2022, which means this latest moment is really part of a much longer pattern rather than a brand new revelation. Each time those allegations have resurfaced, Pooh Shiesty's attorney, Bradford Cohen, has answered in the exact same way. His response has been steady, blunt, and unchanged. He has repeatedly rejected the claims in full, describing them as completely false, absurd, and without any truth behind them. That consistency matters. No matter how much attention the clips generate online, the public reaction doesn't automatically turn an accusation into a fact. At the center of all the chaos, the 2 sides remain exactly where they've been. One repeating the claims and the attorney firmly denying every part of them. Not even once, according to the defense. From day one, their position has been firm. No cooperation agreement existed,
no proffer meetings took place, and no information was ever provided to federal prosecutors. That denial hasn't shifted, and they're still standing by it. They also directed attention back to the 2021 firearms case, saying their defense centered entirely on self-defense. In their version of events, the confrontation intensified only after an alleged attempt was made to rob Pooh Shiesty and the people with him. That was the theory presented in court, and the defense says it shaped the case from start to finish. Questions have continued to swirl around the 63-month sentence. Still, the defense insists that outcome came from legal strategy, courtroom evidence, and the arguments made before the judge, not from any arrangement involving cooperation. In other words, they say the sentence was earned through the case itself, not through behind-the-scenes assistance. Things took another turn in January 2026, just weeks before the reported Dallas incident. Pooh Shiesty posted court documents to Instagram himself. The message was direct. He denied cooperating and publicly made his position unmistakable. He even invoked a code of silence, putting his name and reputation behind that statement in a very visible way.
But it gets better. Shiesty had 6 of his goons with him. They robbed Gucci's cameraman and another man, and then posted all the shit that they took on social media. Now, Roderick Davis, aka Gucci, would identify Pooh Shiesty was wearing a shiesty during the robbery. He'd also identify Big 30.
That's where the story becomes even more tangled. As of April 3, 2026, no major mainstream news organization, including Associated Press, Rolling Stone, XXL, or similar outlets, had independently verified the specific 2009 paperwork allegations being promoted by Wack 100. Despite the noise surrounding the claims, that independent confirmation had not surfaced. For now, that leaves a major gap between what's being alleged online and what has actually been confirmed through established reporting. A 2009 Tennessee state case has been linked to Lontrell Williams Sr. Still, nothing in that record confirms any federal cooperation or a 5K 1.1 agreement. Those federal filings are frequently sealed, which means the public usually cannot see them unless they are formally released. Because of that missing confirmation, much of the conversation online stays in the category of speculation, not proven fact. In a situation this serious, that line makes all the difference. Right now, these claims may be major, widely discussed, and impossible to tune out, but they remain unverified. No matter how intense the attention gets, that point cannot be brushed aside. Even with all of that in mind, another part of this story keeps drawing attention. There's a striking layer of irony here, and it becomes even more noticeable when you look back at comments made not long ago. The contrast is difficult to miss.
After Pooh Shiesty was released from federal prison in October 2025, he spoke with XXL in a high-profile interview and addressed Gucci Mane directly. He reflected on Gucci's path and described watching the way that journey unfolded. In the middle of all the current discussion, those earlier remarks now carry a very different weight. That is what gives this situation so much tension. On one side, there are serious accusations circulating without public proof. On the other, there are past statements that suddenly feel loaded when placed next to the current controversy. Taken together, it creates a story people keep coming back to, not because the facts are settled, but because the unanswered questions are becoming harder to ignore. When he got out of prison, his entire life seemed to shift. According to that interview, Gucci returned with discipline, a stronger routine, and a clear commitment to his health. His thinking looked sharper, his habits looked steadier, and he appeared determined to stay away from the people and environments that had thrown him off course before. What stood out most was the way that change was described. This wasn't framed as someone simply coming home and picking up where he left off. Instead, Gucci was presented as someone who came back rebuilt, more intentional, more grounded, and locked in like never before. He was even portrayed as a person who truly woke up during his time behind bars and used that period to transform for real. That evolution didn't just seem impressive from a distance. It reportedly had a personal effect as well, influencing the way he thought, the way he moved, and the kind of choices he wanted to make going forward. In that conversation, Gucci wasn't talked about like just another rapper with a comeback story. He was held up as a model, a real-life example of what it looks like to leave prison in the past and create something stable without falling back into old patterns, which is exactly why the allegations now feel so jarring. Only months after speaking about Gucci in that light, prosecutors say he was tied to an incident inside a Dallas recording studio involving a weapon allegedly being aimed at the same person he had once praised as an inspiration, the very same Gucci Mane he had spoken on with admiration, the same figure he had pointed to as proof that real change was possible, is now at the center of claims that cast that earlier interview in a completely different light. What keeps pulling people back into this story is the link he reportedly said shaped the way he thought. That detail casts everything in a strange light. The contrast is so sharp, it almost feels impossible. Yet it has become central to how many people now interpret the entire situation. Viewed through that lens, the story stops feeling like something designed for entertainment. Instead, it comes across as real events unfolding in a way that's hard to absorb. There's no neat arc here, no polished drama, just a case that keeps getting more difficult to ignore the deeper you look.
They have ankle monitor data placing Pooh Shiesty at the studio location, despite his home detention restrictions, which is dumb as hell. Pooh should have knew better. They also have cell phone records and license plate reader data showing multiple suspects traveling together from Memphis to Dallas before the incident.
As for the legal side, here's where things stood on April 3, 2026. The case was still just getting started. A 32-page criminal complaint was filed on March 30th, and that document was later unsealed on April 2nd. Up to this point, the court had not set a trial date, and none of the defendants had entered pleas. Under the law, every person involved remains presumed innocent. That principle is still fully in place, and it matters as this case moves forward. Even with that in mind, the complaint already outlines what investigators describe as a broad and layered body of evidence, suggesting they are building their case from multiple directions at once. The amount of material already mentioned is significant, and the list appears to keep growing. Investigators are reportedly drawing from ankle monitor data, cell phone records, and license plate reader information. Even at this early stage, the picture being presented is one of a highly detailed investigation, with each new layer adding more weight to a case that is still only beginning to unfold. A rental car contract tied to the father's name is part of the case. On top of that, investigators say they collected surveillance video from 3 separate locations, along with fingerprints found inside the studio. They also point to social media uploads that allegedly displayed property believed to have been taken.
What makes this especially serious is that the evidence doesn't appear to rest on a single detail. According to authorities, the case is built through multiple overlapping pieces. Greyhound bus records purportedly trace how some members of the group may have returned home. Prosecutors also say victims were able to identify the defendants in several ways, including by appearance, by name, and even through verified Instagram profiles. Taken together, it creates a far more intense picture than a case built on one clue alone. During the April 2 press conference, Ryan Bowles said each defendant could be looking at a sentence of up to life in prison under federal kidnapping statutes. That statement alone dramatically raises the pressure surrounding this case. For Pooh Shiesty, the situation may be even more serious. Authorities say this incident allegedly took place while he was still on federal supervised release. That point could carry major weight. In court, judges often view that as a sign that earlier penalties may not have had the intended effect. If convictions happen, that can influence how harsh the final sentence may be. There's also the federal operation itself. In the early hours of April 1, 2026, at roughly 6 a.m., federal agents purportedly arrived at a family residence in Cordova. Reports indicate flashbang devices were used during the raid, adding yet another dramatic development to a case that already appears packed with high-stakes evidence. Federal agents remained inside the property for hours, carefully gathering what they needed. By the time they left, computers, paperwork, and several bags of seized material had been taken out as evidence. Investigators also gave every vehicle on the property a full search. From the way the operation unfolded, authorities clearly believed they had located something important.
At this point, all of that evidence is purportedly being held in a federal evidence room in the Northern District of Texas, where it now waits for the next stage of the court process. At the center of the case is an especially striking detail. Both the father and son are in custody. Both are facing major federal charges, and both could be looking at life sentences if convicted. According to prosecutors, the father played a direct role in helping crucial parts of the situation come together. Investigators claim he rented the vehicle, confirmed the studio session, was present inside the location, and even looked over the related paperwork. Those allegations have made his role a major focus of the case. Now step back and look at the timing, because this is where the story becomes even more shocking. Pooh Shiesty was released in October 2025, and his supervised release was not scheduled to end until April 11, 2026. In other words, he was only months away from being fully done with it all. The finish line was right there. Soon, there would have been no ankle monitor, no added restrictions, and no ongoing oversight. A fresh start was within reach. His freedom was close, his career still had momentum, and his fan base was ready to stand behind him. Everything seemed set up for a clean new chapter. All he needed to do was stay focused, keep his record clear, and let the remaining time pass. But based on the allegations, that is not what happened. Just as he crossed the finish line, he found himself facing a moment that could overshadow everything else. Cases this large rarely wrap up quickly. With 9 defendants involved, events tied to several different locations, and a mountain of evidence to sort through, the legal process could stretch on for a very long time, possibly more than a year before the full picture is revealed in court. Still, one detail keeps drawing the most attention. Many believe a single piece of evidence could end up steering the entire case. The ankle monitor purportedly placed him at that Dallas studio on January 10, 2026. Once that detail surfaced, other parts of the timeline began falling into place, one after another, creating a chain that became harder to ignore. At this stage, the biggest mystery is no longer what happened, but what comes next. How will the case develop from here, and where will it ultimately lead? Those answers may take time, but the stakes could not be much higher. If you want more deep dives like this, be sure to like, subscribe, share, and leave a comment with your take. One thing is certain, this story is nowhere near finished.